The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., just like it had every day for the past 3 years. Lisa rolled over and hit the snooze button, her body aching from another 14-hour shift at Tony's Family Diner. Her small apartment was quiet except for the gentle breathing coming from the next room, where her mother slept. Lisa pulled herself out of bed and walked to the kitchen. The coffee maker gurgled to life as she checked the stack of medical bills on the counter. The numbers hadn't changed overnight, but she looked anyway. Hope was a funny thing that way. The total still made her stomach twist into knots. Her mother's heart surgery had been successful, but the bills kept coming like waves hitting the shore. She poured coffee into her favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle that read "World's Best Daughter." Her mother had given it to her last Christmas, back when things weren't quite so tight. Back when Lisa thought she might actually save enough money to go back to school and finish her business degree. The shower was quick and cold. The hot water heater had been making strange noises for weeks, but calling a repairman wasn't in the budget. Lisa had learned to live with a lot of things that weren't in the budget. She dried her hair and pulled it back into the neat ponytail that restaurant policy required. Her uniform hung on the door, clean and pressed. She took pride in looking professional, even when everything else felt like it was falling apart. "Morning, Mom," Lisa whispered as she peeked into her mother's room. The older woman was still sleeping, her breathing steady and peaceful. The doctor said she was doing well, but Lisa worried constantly. Every cough, every tired sigh, every time her mother moved slower than usual, Lisa's heart would race. The drive to Tony's Family Diner took 15 minutes through the quiet morning streets. Lisa knew every pothole, every traffic light, every shortcut. The diner sat on the corner of Main Street and Oak Avenue, its red and white checkered exterior looking tired in the early morning light. The neon sign flickered sometimes, especially when it rained, but it had been that way for years. Lisa parked her old Honda Civic in the employee lot behind the building. The car had seen better days, but it got her where she needed to go. She gathered her purse and apron, taking a deep breath before walking through the back door. "You're early again," called out Rosa from behind the grill. Rosa had been cooking at Tony's for almost 20 years. She was the heart of the kitchen, always ready with a smile or a joke when things got stressful. "Couldn't sleep," Lisa replied, tying her apron around her waist. It wasn't entirely true. She could have slept longer, but she preferred being at work early. It gave her time to set up her section properly and check on things before the morning rush started. "Coffee's fresh," Rosa said, nodding toward the pot behind the counter. "And I made those blueberry muffins you like. Saved you one before the vultures get here." Lisa smiled for the first time that day. Rosa always looked out for her. In fact, most of the staff at Tony's did. They were like family, which made the situation with Derek even harder to deal with. Derek was the assistant manager, and he had made Lisa's life difficult from the day he was hired 6 months ago. He was young, maybe 25, and had some kind of business degree that he mentioned at least once during every shift. He talked constantly about efficiency and profit margins, but Lisa noticed that customer complaints had increased since he started making changes. "Where's Derek this morning?" Lisa asked, hoping for a peaceful start to the day. "Called in late," Rosa said with a shrug. "Something about a dentist appointment. Probably nursing another hangover if you ask me." Lisa didn't ask, but she had her suspicions. Derek spent most nights at the sports bar down the street, and he often came to work looking rough around the edges. She focused on getting her section ready instead of thinking about her boss's personal problems. The dining room at Tony's wasn't fancy, but it was clean and comfortable. Red vinyl booths lined the windows and small tables filled the center of the room. Lisa had been assigned to Section 3, which included 6 tables and part of the counter. She knew the regular customers by name and how they liked their coffee. Mrs. Patterson always wanted her eggs over easy with whole wheat toast. Mr. Chen preferred his pancakes with extra syrup and no butter. These small details mattered to Lisa, even if they didn't seem to matter to Derek. By 7 o'clock, the breakfast crowd started trickling in. Lisa moved between tables with practiced ease, taking orders, refilling coffee cups, and making small talk with customers who had become like friends over the years. She genuinely enjoyed this part of her job. Making people feel welcome and cared for came naturally to her. "Lisa, honey, how's your mother doing?" asked Mrs. Patterson as Lisa poured her second cup of coffee. "She's doing much better. Thank you for asking, Lisa replied. Mrs. Patterson had been coming to the diner for 15 years, and she always asked about Lisa's family. You tell her I'm still praying for her, Mrs. Patterson said, patting Lisa's hand gently. These moments made the long hours worth it. Lisa had regular customers who asked about her life, remembered important dates, and treated her like she mattered. She had built relationships over years of consistent service and genuine care. The morning rush picked up around 8:30 when Derek finally arrived. His hair was messy, his shirt was wrinkled, and he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He walked through the dining room without acknowledging any customers and headed straight for the office in the back. Rough night? Rosa asked with a knowing look. Derek just grunted and disappeared behind the office door. Lisa continued working, but she could feel the tension in the air change when Derek was around. He had a way of making everyone feel like they were doing something wrong, even when they weren't. He would stand behind the counter watching the staff, taking notes on a small pad, and generally making people nervous. Around 10 o'clock during the mid-morning lull, Derek emerged from the office with his clipboard and serious expression. This was never a good sign. He walked through Lisa's section, watching her work and writing things down. She tried to ignore him and focus on her customers, but it was hard to concentrate with him hovering nearby. Lisa, Derek called out as she was wiping down an empty table. I need to speak with you. Her heart sank. These conversations never went well. She followed him to a quiet corner of the dining room, hoping whatever this was about could be resolved quickly. I've been watching your service this morning, Derek said, consulting his clipboard. Your table turnover is too slow. You're spending too much time chatting with customers instead of focusing on efficiency. Lisa felt her cheeks flush. The customers seem happy and they're getting good service. Mrs. Patterson has been coming here for 15 years. She expects a certain level of personal attention. Personal attention doesn't pay the bills, Derek replied coldly. We need to move tables faster if we're going to hit our profit targets. Less chatting, more serving. Lisa wanted to argue. She wanted to explain that customer loyalty was built on relationships, not just fast service. She wanted to tell him that the regular customers specifically requested to sit in her section because they trusted her to take care of them. But she needed this job too much to risk making Derek angrier than he already seemed to be. I understand, she said quietly, even though she didn't agree. Good. I'll be watching to make sure you implement these changes, Derek said before walking away. Lisa returned to her tables, but the joy had gone out of her work. She still smiled at customers and provided good service, but Derek's words echoed in her mind. The weight of her mother's medical bills, the stress of working double shifts, and now the constant criticism from her boss felt overwhelming. As the lunch crowd began to arrive, Lisa wondered how much longer she could keep this up. She loved serving people and took pride in her work, but Derek was making it harder every day to remember why she had once enjoyed coming to Tony's family diner. Little did she know that everything was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. Friday evening arrived, with the usual chaos that Lisa had come to expect at Tony's family diner. The dinner rush was always the busiest time of the week, with families stopping by after work and couples looking for a comfortable place to share a meal. Lisa had been on her feet for almost 10 hours already, but she pushed through the tiredness like she always did. The dining room buzzed with conversation and the clatter of silverware against plates. Rosa was working her magic in the kitchen, calling out orders and keeping everything running smoothly despite being short-staffed. Derek was nowhere to be seen, which actually made everyone's job easier. When he wasn't around micromanaging every detail, the staff could focus on what they did best, taking care of customers. Lisa was refilling water glasses at table 12 when she noticed an older man standing near the entrance. He looked uncertain, like he wasn't sure if he should stay or leave. His clothes were worn and faded, the kind that had seen many years of washing and wearing. His gray hair needed a trim and his jacket had a small tear near the left shoulder. Most people would have sized him up in a few seconds and made assumptions about whether he belonged in their restaurant. Lisa saw something different. She saw a person who looked tired and maybe a little lost. She saw someone who might need a friendly face and a warm meal. Without hesitation, she walked over to greet him. Good evening, she said with a genuine smile. Just one tonight? The man looked surprised, as if he hadn't expected such a warm welcome. Yes, just me, he replied quietly. His voice carried a slight tremor either from age or nervousness. "Right this way," Lisa said, leading him to a clean table in her section. It was a corner booth with a good view of the street, away from the busiest part of the dining room. She thought he might prefer somewhere quieter. As they walked past the other tables, Lisa noticed some of the other customers glancing at the man with obvious disapproval. A woman in an expensive suit wrinkled her nose slightly, and a businessman in a tie moved his briefcase closer to his chair. These small reactions made Lisa's heart ache. Everyone deserved to be treated with dignity regardless of how much money they had or what they wore. "This is a nice spot," the man said as he settled into the booth. He looked around the diner with interest, taking in the family photos on the walls and the handwritten specials board near the kitchen. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" Lisa asked, placing a menu in front of him. "The coffee's really good tonight. Rosa makes it strong enough to wake the dead." The man chuckled and his whole face changed. The worry lines around his eyes softened, and Lisa could see that he had a kind smile. "Coffee sounds perfect. I haven't had a good cup in days." Lisa poured the coffee from a fresh pot and set it down gently. "Take your time with the menu. Everything's made fresh, and if you have any questions, just let me know." She moved on to check her other tables, but she kept an eye on the corner booth. The man was studying the menu carefully, running his finger down the prices like he was doing math in his head. Lisa had seen that look before. It was the expression of someone counting every dollar and trying to make difficult choices. 20 minutes later, she returned to take his order. "What sounds good tonight?" "Well," the man said slowly, "I was thinking about the meatloaf dinner. How big are the portions?" "Pretty generous," Lisa replied. "Rosa believes in making sure people leave here full and happy. It comes with mashed potatoes, green beans, and a dinner roll." The man nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds wonderful, but—" He paused and looked down at the menu again. "Actually, maybe I should just have the soup and a roll." "The vegetable soup." Lisa's heart sank. She could tell he wanted the meatloaf but was choosing the cheapest option instead. The soup and roll cost $4.95, while the meatloaf dinner was $12.95. She had been in similar situations herself, counting pennies and choosing necessity over desire. "You know what?" Lisa said, making a decision that would change everything. "Rosa made way too much meatloaf today and we're trying to move it before it goes to waste. How about I bring you the meatloaf dinner for the price of the soup? It would actually help us out." The man's eyes widened with surprise and something that looked like relief. "Are you sure? I don't want to cause any trouble." "No trouble at all," Lisa assured him. "Actually, you'd be doing me a favor. Derek, our assistant manager, gets upset when we have too much food left over at the end of the night." It wasn't entirely true. Derek would probably be furious if he knew what she was doing. But Lisa had made peace with that possibility. Sometimes doing the right thing meant taking a small risk. "That's very kind of you," the man said, his voice thick with emotion. "I haven't had a home-cooked meal in quite a while." Lisa placed the order with Rosa, explaining the situation quietly. Rosa just nodded and added extra vegetables to the plate without being asked. The kitchen staff at Tony's had big hearts, and they understood that sometimes feeding people meant more than just making money. When the food was ready, Lisa carried it to the corner booth herself. The meatloaf was perfectly seasoned, the mashed potatoes were creamy, and the green beans were cooked just right. She had also added a small salad that wasn't part of the regular dinner, hoping the man could use some extra nutrition. "This looks incredible," he said, staring at the plate like it was a gift. "I can't thank you enough." "Enjoy every bite," Lisa replied. "And if you need anything else, just wave me over." As she worked her other tables, Lisa found herself checking on the corner booth more frequently than usual. The man ate slowly, savoring each bite like it was the best meal he'd had in months. He sat up straighter as he ate, and some of the weariness seemed to leave his shoulders. About halfway through his meal, he waved Lisa over. She hurried to his table, hoping everything was okay. "The food is delicious," he said, "but I was wondering if you had a minute to sit down. I don't get much chance to talk to people these days." Lisa glanced around the dining room. It was past the dinner rush, and her other tables were settled with their meals. Derek was still missing in action, probably at the sports bar down the street. "Sure," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "I'm Lisa, by the way." "Nice to meet you, Lisa. I'm Frank." He set down his fork and looked at her with curious eyes. "You've been working hard tonight." "This place seems busy." "Friday nights usually are," Lisa replied. "But I like it busy. The time goes faster and the tips are better." Frank nodded thoughtfully. How long have you been working here? 3 years now, Lisa said. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills. Well, most of them anyway. She hadn't meant to add that last part, but something about Frank made her feel comfortable sharing more than she usually would with customers. Money troubles? Frank asked gently. Lisa felt her cheeks redden. My mom had heart surgery a few months ago. The insurance covered most of it, but the deductibles and co-pays are pretty steep. I'm working double shifts when I can to help with the medical bills. That's a heavy burden for someone so young, Frank said. Your mother is lucky to have a daughter who cares so much. She'd do the same for me, Lisa replied simply. That's what family does. They talked for another 10 minutes about family, work, and life in general. Frank was easy to talk to, and Lisa found herself sharing things she rarely discussed with anyone. He told her about his own family, how his children lived far away and he didn't see them as often as he'd like. There was a sadness in his voice when he talked about being alone, and Lisa understood that feeling more than she cared to admit. When Frank finished his meal, he pulled out a worn wallet and carefully counted out exact change for the soup price they had agreed on. He added a $5 tip, which Lisa knew was probably more than he could afford. You don't need to tip so much, she protested gently. Good service deserves good tips, Frank said firmly. Besides, you gave me something more valuable than food tonight. You gave me kindness when I needed it most. As Frank prepared to leave, Lisa noticed Derek walking through the front door. Her boss looked around the dining room with his usual critical expression, and his eyes immediately focused on the corner booth where she was talking with Frank. I should probably get back to work, Lisa said quickly. Standing up from the booth, of course, Frank replied, also standing. Thank you again for everything, Lisa. You made an old man feel human again tonight. Derek was making his way across the dining room, his expression growing darker with each step. Lisa's stomach tightened as she realized how this must look to him. She was sitting with a customer who obviously didn't fit Derek's idea of the type of clientele Tony's should attract, and she had clearly spent more time at this table than policy allowed. Take care. Frank, Lisa said warmly, despite her growing anxiety about the approaching confrontation. Come back and see us soon. Frank smiled and headed for the door, walking with more confidence than when he had arrived. Lisa began clearing his table, trying to look busy and professional as Derek reached her section. What was that about? Derek demanded, his voice sharp with disapproval. Just taking care of a customer, Lisa replied, stacking the empty plates carefully. That man doesn't look like he belongs here, Derek said bluntly, and I saw you sitting with him. That's not professional behavior. Lisa felt her temper flare but forced herself to speak calmly. He was lonely and wanted someone to talk to. Good customer service means making people feel welcome. Good customer service means turning tables quickly and maximizing profit, Derek shot back. Not wasting time with people who probably can't even afford to eat here. Lisa wanted to defend Frank, to explain that he was a decent person who deserved respect regardless of his circumstances. But she knew Derek wouldn't understand. He saw customers as numbers on a spreadsheet, not as human beings with stories and struggles of their own. I'll keep that in mind, Lisa said through gritted teeth, hating that she had to back down but knowing she needed this job too much to risk a bigger confrontation. Derek walked away muttering about standards and appropriate customer demographics. Lisa finished cleaning the table, her good mood from the evening completely destroyed. She had done something kind for someone who needed it, and her boss had made her feel ashamed of that kindness. As she worked through the rest of her shift, Lisa couldn't stop thinking about Frank. She hoped he would come back despite Derek's obvious disapproval. Everyone deserved a place where they could get a good meal and feel welcome, especially people who were clearly struggling. She had no way of knowing that her simple act of kindness toward a lonely stranger would soon change her life in ways she never could have imagined. Sometimes the most important moments happen when we're just trying to do the right thing for another human being. Saturday morning came too soon for Lisa. She had tossed and turned all night, replaying the confrontation with Derek in her mind. His disapproving words about Frank echoed in her thoughts, making her question whether she had done the right thing. Deep down she knew she had, but that didn't make facing Derek any easier. Lisa arrived at Tony's family diner 30 minutes early as usual. The parking lot was empty except for Rosa's old pickup truck. The morning air was crisp and the first rays of sunlight were just beginning to warm the building's brick exterior. She sat in her car for a few extra minutes, gathering her courage for what she suspected would be a difficult day. The back door was already unlocked when Lisa tried the handle. Rosa was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared for the breakfast rush. The smell of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air, creating the warm, welcoming atmosphere that Lisa loved about the early morning shift. "Morning. Honey?" Rosa called out without looking up from the grill. "You're here even earlier than usual." "Everything okay? Just couldn't sleep," Lisa replied, tying her apron with hands that trembled slightly. "Derek seemed pretty upset last night about that customer I was talking to." Rosa turned around, her expression serious. "The older gentleman in the corner booth? He seemed nice enough to me. What was Derek's problem?" "He thought I spent too much time with him. Said he didn't look like he belonged here." Lisa's voice was tight with frustration and worry. "That boy has a lot to learn about this business," Rosa said, shaking her head. "We've been serving all kinds of people in this place for 20 years. Rich, poor, young, old, doesn't matter. Everyone deserves a good meal and respect." Lisa nodded, grateful for Rosa's support. But she knew Rosa's opinion wouldn't carry much weight if Derek decided to make trouble. As one of the senior employees, Rosa was respected by everyone except Derek, who seemed to view her experience as outdated rather than valuable. The morning passed quietly at first. Lisa set up her section, checked the coffee machines, and prepared for the breakfast crowd. She kept glancing at the office door, waiting for Derek to arrive and hoping their interaction would be brief and professional. At 8:15, Derek's car pulled into the parking lot. Lisa watched through the window as he sat in his vehicle for several minutes talking on his phone. Even from a distance, she could see that his gestures were animated and his expression was stern. Her stomach knotted with anxiety. Derek entered through the back door and walked straight to the office without acknowledging anyone. The door slammed shut behind him, causing several employees to exchange worried glances. When Derek was in a bad mood, everyone felt it. Lisa tried to focus on her work, greeting the early customers with her usual warmth and efficiency. Mrs. Patterson came in at 8:30 and requested her regular table in Lisa's section. Mr. Chen arrived 10 minutes later, settling into his favorite booth by the window. These familiar faces provided some comfort in what was shaping up to be a stressful morning. "How's your mother doing, dear?" Mrs. Patterson asked as Lisa poured her coffee. "Much better, thank you," Lisa replied, grateful for the kind inquiry. "She's getting stronger every day. That's wonderful news. You've been such a devoted daughter through all of this. Your mother raised you right." The compliment warmed Lisa's heart, but it also reminded her of how much was at stake. Her mother depended on Lisa's income for more than just medical bills. The rent, groceries, utilities, everything balanced on Lisa's ability to keep this job. At 9 o'clock, the office door opened. Derek emerged with a clipboard in one hand and a serious expression that made Lisa's blood run cold. He surveyed the dining room like a general inspecting troops, his eyes eventually settling on Lisa as she cleared a table near the window. "Lisa," Derek called out across the dining room, his voice carrying an edge that made other customers look up from their breakfast. "I need to see you in the office now." The word "now" hung in the air like a threat. Lisa's heart began racing as she set down the plates she was carrying and walked toward the back of the restaurant. She could feel the eyes of her co-workers following her, their expressions ranging from sympathetic to worried. The office at Tony's Family Diner was small and cramped, with barely enough room for a desk, 2 chairs, and a filing cabinet. Derek sat behind the desk, making Lisa stand while he consulted his clipboard. The power dynamic was obvious and deliberately intimidating. "Close the door," Derek said without looking up. Lisa closed the door and remained standing, her hands clasped in front of her to keep them from shaking. The office felt smaller with the door closed, and she could hear her own heartbeat in the silence. "We need to discuss your performance last night," Derek began, finally looking up from his clipboard. His eyes were cold and calculating. "Specifically, your violation of company policy regarding customer interactions and unauthorized discounts." "I'm not sure what you mean," Lisa said, though she knew exactly what he was referring to. "Don't play dumb with me," Derek snapped. "I saw you sitting with that homeless man, wasting company time on personal conversations. And Rosa told me you sold him a meatloaf dinner for the price of soup. That's theft, Lisa, pure and simple." Lisa felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. "I paid the difference myself. I told him we had extra food that needed to be moved. I didn't steal anything." You lied to a customer about our inventory, and you manipulated our pricing structure without authorization. Derek continued, reading from notes he had apparently prepared in advance. Both are serious violations of company policy. I was being kind to someone who looked like he needed help, Lisa protested. Since when is kindness against company policy? Since it costs us money and creates the wrong image for our establishment, Derek replied coldly. This is a business, not a charity. We can't have employees giving away food to every sob story that walks through the door. Lisa's temper flared. Frank wasn't a sob story. He was a customer who deserved to be treated with respect. And I didn't give away anything. I paid for it myself. Frank? Derek raised an eyebrow. You're on a first-name basis with him now? How professional. I talk to all our regular customers by name, Lisa said. Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Chen, the Rodriguez family. Customer relationships are what keep people coming back. Those are paying customers from good families, Derek said dismissively. This Frank character is clearly not our target demographic. Having people like him hanging around drives away the customers we actually want. Lisa stared at Derek in disbelief. People like him? What exactly do you mean by that? I think you know exactly what I mean, Derek said, his voice taking on a threatening tone. We need to maintain certain standards in this establishment, standards that apparently you don't understand or care about. The only standard I care about is treating people decently, Lisa shot back, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. Frank was polite, quiet, and grateful for good service. If that's not the kind of customer you want, then maybe you're in the wrong business. Derek's expression darkened further. Are you questioning my business judgment? I'm questioning your humanity, Lisa replied, immediately regretting the words as soon as they left her mouth. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek set down his clipboard and leaned back in his chair, studying Lisa with calculating eyes. She knew she had crossed a line, but she couldn't bring herself to apologize for speaking the truth. I see, Derek said finally, his voice dangerously quiet. So not only do you violate company policy, but you also show disrespect to management. This is exactly what I expected from someone with your background. Lisa wasn't sure what he meant by background, but the way he said it made her skin crawl. There was something ugly in his tone, something that went beyond professional criticism. I've been a good employee for 3 years, Lisa said, fighting to keep her voice steady. My customer satisfaction scores are high, I've never missed a shift, and I work harder than anyone else here. Your work ethic isn't the problem, Derek replied. It's your judgment and your inability to understand appropriate professional boundaries. This incident with the homeless man is just the latest example of poor decision-making. Stop calling him homeless, Lisa said firmly. You don't know anything about Frank or his situation. I know enough, Derek said, standing up from his chair. I know that you prioritize the comfort of someone who probably can't afford to eat here over the standards and policies of this establishment. That shows a fundamental lack of understanding about how businesses operate. Lisa felt tears of frustration building behind her eyes, but she refused to let Derek see her cry. So what happens now? Derek picked up a folder from his desk and opened it dramatically. I've been documenting performance issues for weeks. Spending too much time chatting with customers, failure to maximize table turnover, and now this incident with unauthorized discounting and unprofessional behavior. Performance issues? Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. My section has the highest tip averages in the restaurant. Customers specifically ask to sit with me. Tips don't matter if you're not following proper procedures, Derek said dismissively. And as of this morning, those customers will need to find someone else to sit with. The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. What are you saying? I'm saying your employment at Tony's Family Diner is terminated effective immediately, Derek announced, his voice cold and formal. You can clean out your locker and leave your apron on the desk. Lisa felt the room spinning around her. This couldn't be happening. She needed this job desperately. Her mother's medical bills, their rent, basic necessities. Everything depended on her income from Tony's. You can't fire me for being kind to a customer, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I can fire you for violating company policy, showing disrespect to management, and failing to maintain professional standards, Derek replied matter-of-factly, all of which are documented in your file. Please, Lisa said, swallowing her pride. I need this job. My mother depends on me. Can't we work something out? Derek's expression didn't soften at all. You should have thought about that before you decided to turn this place into a homeless shelter. Maybe next time you'll remember that actions have consequences. Lisa wanted to scream, to tell Derek exactly what she thought of his heartless attitude and twisted priorities, but she knew that making things worse wouldn't help her situation. She needed to think about her next steps, not waste energy on anger. Fine, she said quietly. I'll clean out my locker. And Lisa, Derek added as she reached for the door handle, I wouldn't count on getting a good reference from this place. Potential employers will want to know why you were terminated. The threat was clear. Derek wasn't content with just firing her. He wanted to make sure she would have trouble finding another job. Lisa opened the door and walked out of the office, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. The dining room felt different as she walked through it one last time as an employee. Rosa looked up from the kitchen with concern in her eyes. Mrs. Patterson was still sitting at her regular table, unaware that her favorite waitress had just lost her job for the crime of showing kindness to a stranger. Lisa cleaned out her locker in a daze, stuffing her few personal belongings into a plastic bag. Her hands shook as she untied her apron and left it on Derek's desk as instructed. 3 years of her life, gone in 15 minutes because she had chosen compassion over company policy. As she walked to her car, Lisa could feel the stares of her former co-workers through the windows. Some looked sympathetic, others looked scared, probably wondering if they could be next. The morning sun that had seemed so promising earlier now felt harsh and unforgiving. Lisa sat in her car for several minutes trying to process what had just happened. How was she going to tell her mother? How were they going to pay next month's bills? The future that had seemed challenging but manageable just an hour ago now looked terrifying and uncertain. But even as tears ran down her cheeks, Lisa knew she would make the same choice again. Frank had needed kindness and she had given it to him. If that was wrong in Derek's world, then maybe Derek's world was the problem, not her actions. She started her car and drove home, not knowing that her act of simple human decency would soon lead to the most unexpected turn her life had ever taken. Sunday morning arrived gray and overcast, matching Lisa's mood perfectly. She had spent most of Saturday in her pajamas, alternating between crying and staring at the stack of bills on her kitchen counter. Her mother had tried to comfort her, but Lisa could see the worry in her eyes. They both knew how precarious their financial situation had become with the loss of Lisa's income. Lisa was nursing her third cup of coffee and scanning online job listings when her phone rang at 9:30. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered anyway, hoping it might be someone calling about one of the resumes she had submitted online the night before. Hello, is this Lisa? The voice was professional but warm, belonging to a woman who sounded like she was probably in her 40s. Yes, this is Lisa, she replied, trying to inject some energy into her voice despite feeling exhausted. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and I'm calling from Tony's Family Diner. I know this might seem strange, but I need to ask if you could come in this morning for a meeting. Lisa's heart sank. If this is about returning my uniform or something Derek forgot to take care of, I can drop it off later. I don't really want to see him right now. Rebecca laughed softly. Oh no, Derek won't be there. This is about something completely different. I'm actually calling on behalf of the restaurant owner. He specifically requested to meet with you. The owner? Lisa was confused. In 3 years of working at Tony's, she had never met or even heard much about the actual owner. She had assumed it was just some businessman who owned multiple restaurants and never bothered to visit the individual locations. Yes, and I know this is short notice, but would it be possible for you to come in around 11 this morning? I promise it will be worth your time. Lisa hesitated. The last thing she wanted was to walk back into Tony's and face the stares of her former co-workers. But curiosity was stronger than embarrassment, and she found herself agreeing to the meeting. Okay, I'll be there at 11. Should I come to the front door or the employee entrance? Front door is fine. Thank you so much, Lisa. We'll see you soon. After hanging up, Lisa sat staring at her phone, trying to make sense of the call. Why would the owner want to meet with a fired waitress? Maybe Derek had exaggerated the situation in his report, and the owner wanted to hear her side of the story. Or perhaps they were planning to offer her job back with conditions attached. Lisa showered and dressed carefully, choosing a simple blue blouse and black pants that looked professional but not overly formal. She wasn't sure what to expect from this meeting, but she wanted to make a good impression just in case there was still hope for her employment at Tony's. The drive to the restaurant felt surreal. Just 2 days ago, she had made this same trip as an employee excited about starting her shift. Now she was returning as an outsider, unsure of her welcome or her future. Tony's family diner looked the same from the outside, but Lisa felt like everything had changed. She parked in the customer lot instead of the employee area, a small detail that reminded her of how different her circumstances were now. The front door chimed as she entered, and several customers looked up from their late breakfast. Lisa recognized a few regular faces, and they smiled and waved as if nothing had changed. She wondered if they knew she no longer worked there, or if Derek had made up some story about her sudden absence. Rebecca Martinez was waiting near the hostess station. She was an attractive woman with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a tailored navy suit that suggested she held an important position in the company. Her smile was genuine and welcoming, which helped ease some of Lisa's nervousness. "Lisa, thank you so much for coming," Rebecca said, extending her hand for a firm handshake. "I'm Rebecca. We spoke on the phone. The owner is waiting for us in the back conference room." Lisa followed Rebecca through the dining room, noticing that Derek was nowhere to be seen. Rosa waved from the kitchen window, giving her an encouraging smile that made Lisa feel slightly better about being there. The conference room was a small space behind the main office that Lisa had never seen before. It contained a round table with 4 chairs, a whiteboard on one wall, and several framed photos of what looked like company events and grand openings. Sitting at the table was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes that looked strangely familiar. He was wearing a simple button-down shirt and khakis, and he stood up with a warm smile as Lisa entered the room. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. It was Frank, the customer she had served on Friday night. The man Derek had called homeless. The person whose presence had ultimately cost her the job she desperately needed. "Hello again, Lisa," Frank said gently. "I imagine you're rather surprised to see me." Lisa stood frozen in the doorway, her mind racing to process what she was seeing. Frank looked different somehow, cleaner, more confident, but definitely the same person who had sat in her corner booth 2 nights ago. "I don't understand," Lisa said slowly, looking back and forth between Frank and Rebecca. "Please, sit down," Frank said, pulling out a chair for her. "I have quite a bit to explain, and I think you deserve to hear the whole story." Lisa sat down carefully, feeling like she might be dreaming. Nothing about this situation made sense. How was Frank here? Why was he with someone from the corporate office? Rebecca opened a folder and pulled out several documents, but Frank held up his hand to stop her. "Let me start from the beginning," Frank said, settling back into his chair. "My full name is Frank Romano. Tony's family diner isn't just named after some random Tony. It's named after my father, Antonio Romano, who started this business 43 years ago." Lisa felt her mouth fall open. "You're the owner?" "I am," Frank confirmed. "And Friday night I was conducting what we call an undercover evaluation. I've been visiting all of our locations without identifying myself, trying to get an honest picture of how our restaurants are really operating. But your clothes, the way you looked..." Lisa trailed off, realizing how her words might sound. Frank smiled sadly. "I deliberately dressed down and acted like someone who was struggling financially. I wanted to see how our staff treated customers who didn't look wealthy or important. It's something I've been doing for months at different locations." Rebecca leaned forward. "What we've discovered is that some of our managers have been creating an environment that's very different from what the Romano family intended when they started this business." "Derek," Lisa said, understanding beginning to dawn on her. "Derek is a perfect example of the problem we've been seeing," Frank confirmed. "When I walked into this location on Friday night, I could feel the tension in the air. Several customers and even some staff members looked at me like I didn't belong, but then you approached me with genuine kindness." Lisa remembered that night clearly, Frank's uncertain expression, the way other customers had reacted to his presence, Derek's disapproval of her interaction with him. "You treated me like I mattered," Frank continued. "You gave me a comfortable table, made friendly conversation, and when you realized I was counting my money carefully, you found a way to help without making me feel embarrassed or ashamed. I just wanted you to have a good meal," Lisa said quietly. "That's exactly what our restaurants should be about," Rebecca interjected. "Tony's family diner was built on the principle that everyone deserves good food and respect, regardless of their circumstances." Frank nodded. My father started this business because he remembered what it felt like to be poor and hungry. He wanted to create places where working families could afford to eat out occasionally, where elderly people could have a social meal, where anyone could feel welcome and cared for. Lisa thought about all the regular customers she had served over the years. Factory workers celebrating payday, elderly couples on fixed incomes treating themselves to dinner out, families scraping together money for a special occasion. Tony's had always been that kind of place, at least until Derek arrived. What I witnessed on Friday night confirmed everything we've been hearing about this location, Frank said, his expression growing serious. Derek has been systematically creating policies and an atmosphere that discriminates against customers based on their appearance or perceived economic status. The staff has been complaining for months, Rebecca added, consulting her notes. Employee morale is at an all-time low, customer complaints have increased significantly, and several longtime patrons have stopped coming regularly. Lisa felt a mix of validation and sadness. She had watched Derek's changes slowly poison the atmosphere at Tony's, but she hadn't realized how widespread the problem had become. But why didn't you identify yourself that night? Lisa asked. You could have stopped Derek from firing me. Frank's expression grew regretful. I wanted to see how the situation would play out naturally. I needed to understand exactly what kind of environment Derek was creating and how far he would go to enforce his discriminatory policies. So, you let me get fired to prove a point? Lisa felt a flash of anger. I let you get fired because I needed documented evidence of Derek's behavior, Frank said firmly. But I also knew that I would be rectifying the situation immediately. You were never going to stay unemployed, Lisa. Rebecca pulled out another set of documents. We've been investigating Derek's management practices for weeks. Yesterday's incident was the final piece of evidence we needed to justify his termination. Derek has been fired? Lisa asked, hardly daring to believe it. As of this morning, yes, Frank confirmed. We also discovered that he had been falsifying some financial reports and implementing policies that directly violated company guidelines about customer service and discrimination. Lisa felt a wave of relief wash over her, followed quickly by hope. Does this mean I can have my job back? Frank and Rebecca exchanged a look that Lisa couldn't interpret. There was something else going on here, something bigger than just getting her waitressing position back. Lisa, Frank said carefully, I'd like to offer you something more than just your old job. I've been watching this location struggle under poor management for months. I need someone to turn things around, someone who understands what this restaurant is supposed to represent. I'm offering you the position of general manager, Rebecca said, sliding a contract across the table. Full benefits, a significant salary increase, and the authority to hire and train staff according to the original Romano family values. Lisa stared at the contract, unable to process what she was seeing. The salary figure was more than double what she had been making as a waitress. The benefits package included full health insurance that would cover her mother's ongoing medical needs. I don't have management experience, Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. You have something better than experience, Frank replied. You have integrity, compassion, and a genuine understanding of what hospitality means. Those are things that can't be taught. Plus, we'll provide extensive training and support, Rebecca added. Frank will be personally involved in helping you transition into the role, and you'll have access to all of our corporate resources. Lisa looked at the contract again, trying to make sure she wasn't misunderstanding something. This seemed too good to be true, like something that happened in movies rather than real life. Why me? She asked finally. There must be other candidates with more experience. Frank leaned forward, his expression earnest. Because on Friday night, when you thought no one important was watching, you chose to be kind to someone who looked like they needed kindness. You risked your job to make sure a hungry person got a good meal. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. The restaurant business is full of people who can manage inventory and balance books, Rebecca said. But finding someone who truly understands that we're in the business of taking care of people, that's rare. Lisa thought about her mother, about the medical bills, about the uncertainty that had been weighing on her family for months. This opportunity would solve their immediate financial problems and give her a chance to build a real career. But more than that, it would allow her to create the kind of workplace she had always wanted Tony's to be. A place where employees were valued, where customers were treated with dignity regardless of their circumstances, where the original vision of the Romano family could flourish again. "I'd like to accept," Lisa said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I want to help turn this place around." Frank's face broke into a wide grin. "I was hoping you'd say that." "Welcome to management, Lisa. I think you're going to do wonderful things here." As Rebecca explained the details of the contract and discussed training schedules, Lisa felt like her entire world had shifted. 24 hours ago, she had been a fired waitress with no prospects and mounting bills. Now she was going to be the general manager of the restaurant where she had worked for 3 years. It seemed impossible that one act of simple kindness could lead to such a dramatic change in circumstances. But as Frank continued to explain his vision for the restaurant's future, Lisa realized that sometimes the most important moments in life happen when we're just trying to do the right thing for another human being. The best part was knowing that she would finally have the power to ensure that every customer who walked through the doors of Tony's family diner would be treated with the same respect and kindness that she had always believed everyone deserved. Monday morning felt different from any morning Lisa had experienced in years. Instead of dragging herself out of bed to face another day of demanding customers and Derek's criticism, she woke up naturally at 6 o'clock, energized and excited about the challenges ahead. Today was her first official day as general manager of Tony's family diner. The night before, she had stayed up late studying the employee handbook and company policies that Rebecca had given her. Frank had been right about Derek implementing procedures that went against the Romano family's original vision. Several policies about customer service, employee break times, and hiring practices had been changed without corporate approval. Lisa's mother had cried when she heard about the promotion and salary increase. For the first time in months, they wouldn't have to worry about choosing between groceries and medical bills. The new health insurance plan would cover her mother's ongoing treatment completely, removing the financial stress that had been weighing on their family since the surgery. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," her mother had said, hugging her tightly. "Your father would have been amazed to see how you turned such a difficult situation into this wonderful opportunity." Now, as Lisa drove to work in the pre-dawn darkness, she felt her father's presence in a way she hadn't since his death 5 years ago. He had always taught her to treat people with kindness and respect, regardless of their circumstances. In a strange way, getting fired for following those principles had led to the biggest opportunity of her life. The parking lot was empty except for Rosa's pickup truck when Lisa arrived. She used her new keys to unlock the front door, feeling a thrill of responsibility and purpose. These were her keys now, her restaurant to manage and improve. Rosa was already at work in the kitchen, preparing for the breakfast rush. She looked up in surprise when Lisa walked through the dining room instead of coming through the back entrance. "Well, look who's here bright and early," Rosa said with a knowing smile. "I heard you got some interesting news yesterday." Word traveled fast in a small restaurant. Lisa had called Rosa the night before to share the news, knowing that the kitchen staff would be crucial allies in implementing the changes she wanted to make. "It still doesn't feel real," Lisa admitted, tying an apron around her waist. "A week ago I was worried about losing my job, and now I'm responsible for running the whole place." "You'll do great," Rosa assured her. "You've been acting like a manager for years anyway, just without the title or the authority to make real changes." Lisa spent the next hour walking through the restaurant with fresh eyes, seeing it from a manager's perspective rather than as an employee. The dining room was clean but tired-looking. The paint was faded in places, several booth seats needed repair, and the lighting was dimmer than it should be. She made notes about immediate improvements that could make the space more welcoming. At 7:30, the rest of the morning staff began arriving. Their reactions to seeing Lisa in a management role ranged from confusion to excitement. Most of the employees had respected her work ethic and leadership qualities, but adjusting to the shift in hierarchy would take some time. "Is it true that Derek got fired?" asked Jamie, one of the younger waitresses, as she tied her apron. "Yes, it's true," Lisa confirmed. "There will be some changes around here, but I'll explain everything at our staff meeting this afternoon." By 8 o'clock, the breakfast crowd was arriving, and Lisa found herself in the strange position of overseeing operations rather than taking orders. She watched the staff work, noting areas where service could be improved and identifying which employees might benefit from additional training. Mrs. Patterson came in at her usual time and requested her regular table. When she saw Lisa greeting customers instead of serving them, she looked confused. "Aren't you going to be my waitress today, dear?" Mrs. Patterson asked. Lisa smiled warmly. "I've been promoted to manager, Mrs. Patterson, but don't worry. I've made sure Jamie knows exactly how you like your coffee and eggs." Manager. Mrs. Patterson's face lit up with delight. "How wonderful. You certainly deserve it after all the excellent service you've provided over the years." These interactions continued throughout the morning as regular customers noticed Lisa's new role. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many people expressing that they weren't surprised to see her promoted. Several customers mentioned that they had been considering finding a new restaurant because the service and atmosphere had declined recently under Derek's management. At 10:30, Frank arrived for their scheduled meeting. He had changed out of his formal business attire and was wearing jeans and a casual shirt, looking more like the Frank who had sat in her section the previous Friday than the company owner who had offered her the promotion. "How's the first morning going?" he asked as they sat down in the small conference room. "Busy but good," Lisa replied. "I've been taking notes about immediate improvements we could make to brighten up the dining room and improve efficiency." Frank nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of proactive thinking we need. What's your priority list looking like?" Lisa opened her notebook and consulted the pages of observations she had made. "First, I want to schedule a staff meeting to discuss the changes in management and set clear expectations for customer service. Second, we need to address some of the policies Derek implemented that were making employees and customers unhappy, such as he had shortened everyone's break times, eliminated the employee meal benefit, and created this point system for customer complaints that was making the staff paranoid about providing personalized service," Lisa explained. "People were afraid to spend extra time with customers because they might get written up for slow table turnover." Frank shook his head in disgust. "That's exactly the opposite of what we want. My father always said that taking care of employees was the key to taking care of customers. I'd like to restore the original break schedules and bring back the employee meal program," Lisa continued. "I also want to eliminate Derek's complaint point system and replace it with regular training sessions focused on positive customer service techniques." "Approved," Frank said immediately. "What else?" "The dining room needs some cosmetic improvements. Fresh paint, better lighting, maybe some new artwork that reflects the family restaurant atmosphere we're trying to create. And I think we should consider expanding the menu to include some healthier options and comfort food classics that appeal to our core customer base." Frank was taking notes as Lisa spoke, clearly impressed with her comprehensive approach to the management role. "You've put a lot of thought into this. What about staffing?" "That's where I might need your guidance," Lisa admitted. "Derek fired 2 good employees in the past month for reasons that seem questionable now. I'd like to reach out to them about returning, but I want to make sure I'm following proper procedures. I'll have Rebecca send you their personnel files so you can review the circumstances," Frank said. "If Derek's reasons for termination were as arbitrary as everything else he did, we'll certainly consider bringing them back." They spent another hour discussing operational details, budget considerations, and Lisa's timeline for implementing changes. Frank was patient with her questions and seemed genuinely excited about her ideas for improving the restaurant. "There is one more thing I want to discuss," Frank said as their meeting was winding down. "I've been thinking about what happened Friday night and I realize I put you in an impossible position." Lisa looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "I came into your restaurant deliberately disguised as someone who was struggling financially, and I tested your character without your knowledge or consent. That wasn't entirely fair to you, but if you hadn't done that, Derek would still be here making everyone miserable," Lisa pointed out. "True, but you suffered real consequences for doing the right thing. You spent a weekend worried about your job and your family's financial security, because I chose to conduct my investigation in a way that put you at risk." Lisa considered this perspective. "I suppose that's true, but I would make the same choice again. Treating people with kindness shouldn't depend on whether someone important is watching." Frank smiled. "That attitude is exactly why I knew you were the right person for this job. But I still feel responsible for the stress you experienced, so I want to offer you something beyond just the management position." He pulled out another document and placed it on the table. "This is a profit-sharing agreement. Starting immediately, you'll receive a percentage of the restaurant's monthly profits in addition to your base salary. If you succeed in turning this place around, you'll be financially rewarded for your success. Lisa stared at the document, hardly believing what she was reading. The profit-sharing percentage was generous, and if the restaurant performed well, it would mean significant additional income for her family. "This is incredibly generous," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's also smart business," Frank replied. "You're going to work harder and care more about this restaurant's success if you have a personal stake in the outcome. Plus, I have a good feeling that you're going to exceed all of our expectations." At 2 o'clock, Lisa held her first staff meeting as general manager. She had asked all employees to gather in the dining room during the slow period between lunch and dinner. Looking at the faces around her, Rosa from the kitchen, Jamie and the other waitresses, the busboys and dishwashers, Lisa felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. "I know this transition is a little unusual," she began, "and I want to address any questions or concerns you might have about working under my management. Are you going to fire people like Derek did?" asked Carlos, one of the busboys who had been with the restaurant for 2 years. "The only way you'll lose your job here is if you stop treating customers and coworkers with respect," Lisa said firmly. "I believe in giving people opportunities to improve and succeed, not looking for reasons to get rid of them." She spent the next 30 minutes explaining the policy changes she was implementing immediately: restored break times, the return of employee meals, and the elimination of Derek's punitive point system. The relief on everyone's faces was obvious and heartwarming. "I also want to establish some new expectations," Lisa continued. "We're going to focus on making every customer feel welcome and valued, regardless of how they look or how much money they spend. This is a family restaurant, which means we treat everyone like family." "What if difficult customers complain about our service?" Jamie asked. "We'll handle complaints professionally and work to resolve issues fairly," Lisa replied. "But we won't change our core values to appease people who want us to discriminate against other customers." Rosa raised her hand. "What about menu changes? Derek was always threatening to eliminate items that didn't sell quickly enough." "I want to expand our menu to better serve our customers' needs," Lisa said. "I'm going to be asking for your input about what items to add and what changes might improve our offerings." The meeting continued for another